A devastating turn of events along the Polish-Ukrainian border has threatened to plunge NATO into a direct confrontation with Russia, not through an act of Russian aggression, but through a sinister and manipulative plot allegedly orchestrated by a radical faction of Ukrainian ultra-nationalists. This incident centered around a deadly explosion in the Polish city of Decisive has exposed the grave and unpredictable dangers spawned by the long and brutal war. It has brought the Western alliance to the brink, ignite a firestorm of social unrest within Poland, and provided a terrifying illustration of how extremist elements born from the crucible of conflict can hijack the fate of nations. The crisis has shattered the foundational narrative of unwavering Polish-Ukrainian brotherhood and has become a powerful, if tragic, vindication for the Trump administration's cautious approach to the war. For years, Poland has stood as Ukraine's most steadfast and indispensable ally. Since the beginning of the conflict, the Polish people and their government have undertaken a national effort of historic proportion, opening their borders, their homes, and their hearts to millions of Ukrainian refugees. Cities like Warsaw, Krakow, and especially the border hub of Decisive transformed into sanctuaries. Polish society absorbed the massive influx with remarkable grace, providing housing, food, education, and healthcare. The Polish government became the primary logistical pipeline for Western military and humanitarian aid flowing to Ukraine, with Decisive Airport functioning as the most critical NATO transfer point for weapons and supplies. This solidarity was not just policy, it was a deeply felt moral commitment rooted in a shared history and a common suspicion of Russian imperialism. Poland willingly bore an immense economic and social burden, viewing it as an investment in its own security and the defense of European values. However, beneath the surface of unity, a more complex and volatile reality was taking shape. Over time, the demographic of the Ukrainian population in Poland began to shift. While many were women, children, and the elderly, a significant and growing number were men of fighting age who had either fled Ukraine to avoid conscription or belonged to nationalist paramilitary groups deeply disillusioned with the Kyiv government's handling of the war. As the situation on the front line deteriorated, particularly with the loss of territory like Pokrovsk, these factions grew more radical and desperate. They viewed any talk of a negotiated settlement, such as the kind being advocated by the Trump administration and a growing number of European leaders, as an act of treason. Among these groups, a shadowy ultra-nationalist organization known to intelligence agencies as the Galician Sword began to gain prominence. This secretive and fanatical group, composed of combat veterans and radical ideologues, operated under a chillingly simple belief: Ukraine could only achieve total victory and secure its future by forcing a direct war between NATO and Russia. They saw Poland not as a gracious host, but as a tool, a stepping stone to trigger NATO's Article 5 collective defense clause. Their strategy was predicated on the idea that if Russia were to be blamed for an attack on Polish soil that resulted in the death of NATO citizens, the alliance would have no choice but to retaliate, thereby bringing the full military might of the West crashing down on Russia. It was a strategy of ultimate escalation, born from the conviction that only a wider war could save Ukraine from annihilation. The plot was executed with brutal precision. On a quiet Tuesday morning, a powerful explosion tore through a marketplace in a residential district of Decisive, a neighborhood heavily populated by both Poles and Ukrainian refugees' families. The blast was devastating, causing dozens of casualties, including Polish citizens. In the immediate chaos and horror, the cause seemed obvious. The preliminary assessment from Polish authorities, fueled by panic and rage, pointed to a stray Russian cruise missile. The attack had all the hallmarks of previous Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities. The narrative took hold instantly. Russia, in its barbarity, had finally crossed the line and attacked a NATO country. The reaction in Poland was volcanic. Grief quickly turned to fury. The Polish public, who had sacrificed so much to help their neighbor, felt a profound sense of betrayal and violation. Calls for immediate and overwhelming retaliation against Russia echoed from every corner of the country. The Polish government was placed in an impossible position. Bowing to immense public pressure and their own long-held hawkish instincts, Polish leaders condemned the barbaric Russian attack and announced their intention to formally request Article 5 consultations with their NATO allies. For a few terrifying hours, the world held its breath as a direct war between the world's two largest nuclear powers seemed not just possible, but imminent. In Washington, the news was received with extreme alarm and immediate skepticism at the highest level of the Trump administration. President Donald Trump, upon being briefed on the incident, reportedly expressed deep suspicion about the official narrative. He had long warned that the Ukraine war was a powder keg that could ignite a global conflict through miscalculation or deliberate provocation. He immediately ordered his national security team to find the real story. He made it clear to his cabinet that he would not allow the United States to be tricked or dragged into World War III based on preliminary reports. His primary objective was to de-escalate and to uncover the truth before an irreversible decision was made. This presidential directive set off an urgent top priority investigation led by the American intelligence community. The Central Intelligence Agency, under Director John Ratcliffe, and the Defense Intelligence Agency worked around the clock. They deployed every available asset to analyze the incident. High-resolution satellite imagery was reviewed to trace the trajectory of the projectile. Signals intelligence platforms secured the airwaves for any unusual communications. A specialized team from the Pentagon was dispatched to Poland, officially to assist with the investigation, but in reality to conduct its own independent forensic analysis of the bomb fragments and the blast site. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth placed all U.S. force in Europe on high alert as a precautionary measure, but strongly advised the president against any mobilization or offensive posturing aimed at Russia until the facts were known. At the State Department, Secretary of State Marco Rubio faced the monumental task of managing the diplomatic fallout. He immediately flew to Brussels for an emergency NATO meeting and was in constant contact with the Polish foreign minister. His public task was to show solidarity with a wounded ally. His private task, however, was far more delicate. He had to urge caution and restraint, convincing a furious Polish government to wait for a full, verified investigation before taking any irreversible steps. He used back channels to communicate with Moscow, conveying that the United States was treating the situation with the utmost seriousness but was not leaping to conclusion. Small but vital effort to prevent Russia from overreacting to the false accusation. Within 48 hours, the American investigation began to yield shocking results. The forensic analysis of the missile debris did not match any known Russian cruise missile variant in service. Instead, the component were traced to an older Soviet-era surface-to-air missile, a type that had been extensively modified. More damningly, satellite and radar data showed that the missile's trajectory did not originate from Russian or Belarusian territory. It had been launched from a mobile platform located in a remote forested area in the border region inside Ukrainian territory, but perilously close to Poland. The final conclusive piece of evidence came from the National Security Agency, which had intercepted encrypted communication between members of the Galician Sword faction in the days leading up to the attack. The message spoke of a great sacrifice and a holy fire that would awaken the West and force it to join the final battle. The findings were clear and irrefutable. The attack on Zhezov was not an act of Russian aggression. It was a false flag operation, a horrific act of provocation carried out by a rogue Ukrainian extremist group in a desperate bid to trigger a global war. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard presented the complete intelligence package to President Trump in the Oval Office. The report detailed the motive, means, and methods of the attack, providing a chilling portrait of how the chaos of the war had spawned a monster that was now turning on its own benefactors. The revelation created a new and even more complex crisis. The United States now possessed information that completely contradicted the public position of one of its key NATO allies. Secretary Rubio was tasked with the unenviable job of flying to Warsaw to present the finding directly to the Polish president and prime minister in a closed-door, highly secured meeting. The reaction from the Polish leadership was reportedly one of initial disbelief, followed by shock and then cold, quiet fury. They had been betrayed in the most profound way imaginable by a radicalized element of the very people they had fought so hard to protect. This placed the Polish government in a political death trap. They could not publicly admit the truth. To do so would be a national humiliation of unprecedented scale. It would reveal that their government had nearly led NATO into a world war based on a lie. More dangerously, it would unleash a wave of anti-Ukrainian sentiment that could lead to widespread violence against the millions of refugees still living in Poland. The narrative of brotherhood would be replaced by one of suspicion and deep-seated resentment. Forced to act in secret, the Polish government, in coordination with American intelligence, launched a massive and brutal crackdown. Polish Special Force and Internal Security Services began conducting raids across the country, targeting suspected members of the Galician Sword and other ultra-nationalist cells. The open and welcoming refugee centers became sites of intense security screening. The once seamless border crossing was now heavily militarized. The logistical pipeline of aid, while not officially severed, was subjected to draconian new security protocols, slowing the flow of support to a trickle. The official government in Kyiv, upon being informed of the plot by Washington, reacted with absolute horror and immediately disavowed the action of the Galician Sword, branding them traitors and terrorists. But the damage was irreparable. The special relationship between Poland and Ukraine was shattered. Ukraine's most vital lifeline to the West was now compromised. The incident in Zazov, designed to force NATO into the war, had achieved the exact opposite. It had exposed the terrifying radicalism conflict was breeding, giving President Trump and other skeptics the ultimate argument for why the war needed to end immediately before its toxic fallout could consume all of Europe. The push for negotiated settlement was no longer just a policy preference. It had become a global security imperative. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to Stockholm Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first ones on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build the show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.